Pro Football Focus has their top 10 quarterbacks and receivers for the 2025 college football season, and they're right to have Sam Leavitt and Jordyn Tyson as high as they do.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks to all of you for making us your first listen of the day. Pro Football Focus, whether you love them or hate them, is starting to put out their top 10 list for next season in college football. Sam Leavitt, number 2. I love it to pieces. Jordyn Tyson, number 3. I love it. And then who else should be in the top 10? Well, that's what we're going to talk about at the end of the episode. Let's go ahead and talk about Sam Leavitt first and foremost. Sam Leavitt, number 2 returning quarterback for 2025 in college football. Wow. Now, here's what I'll tell you. Absolutely. 100%. You can call me biased if you want. And I'm about to tell you why it's not as biased as you think. The only guy that is ahead of him right now, I feel like this is going to shock some people because I know a lot of people are going to think of Drew Aller from Penn State. And I think you'd be right in thinking that right up until I tell you, nope, Drew Aller is number 4. I don't like that he's number 4, especially because the guy ahead of him, I don't think he should be as high as he is. Number 1 is Cade Klubnik from Clemson. And I'll tell you right now, I love that. I was not a Cade Klubnik man. He was not good his first 2 seasons. He comes in as a freshman in relief for, was it Udoh back then? Yeah, it was. It was DJ Udoh. And Klubnik comes in and he stinks. Like, he was bad, man. Like, you're sitting there. I imagine if you were a Clemson fan, you're like, I don't know about this. Sophomore season, he is not much better. He does not look good. You know what? That might have been his junior season. I think he redshirted as a freshman. Regardless, he did not look good for the first 3 years that he saw the football field. And then last year, he put it all together. Like, he was a good quarterback. It blew me away, especially like the first half of the season. You're like, oh, okay, he's just putting together a hot start. Like, you didn't buy it. You're like, okay, I know what you are, Cade Klubnik. But then he ends the season just as borderline a Heisman favorite. And you're like, okay, nope, I think Cade Klubnik has arrived. And he's going to go into next season as one of the Heisman favorites. I'm curious what our friends over at FanDuel have him for their Heisman odds. Sam Leavitt is not that far behind. And I know that sounds crazy for some of you. But let me try and paint this picture for anyone who is doubting this, or maybe you are tuning into the show as a fan of one of the other quarterbacks that's on this list. And you know what? Let me go ahead and give you the other quarterbacks that are in the top 10. So number 1, Cade Klubnik. Number 2, Sam Leavitt. In order, 3 to 10. Carson Beck. I don't like that, especially because he's ahead of Drew Aller. Aller's number 4. Not a fan. Not a fan. Garrett Nussmeier's after that. I would also have Nussmeier ahead of Carson Beck. Arch Manning, that'll be a decisive one. I think that he could be higher, but I also know that he does not have a lot of time playing yet. We'll see. I'm still really high on Arch Manning. I think he's going to be terrific, but we'll wait and see. DJ Lagway, Diego Pavia. If you know anything about me, you know that Pavia is like my favorite player in college football who is not an Arizona State Sun Devil. Nico Iamaleava and Kevin Jennings. I like that top 10 list. I don't think they're missing anybody that I wouldn't have in there. I'd have to really sit down and think about it, but I look at that and I feel like it's pretty good. Obviously, if I am Big 12 bias like Jake Retzlaff and Rocco Becht. There it is. I was combining his 2 names to Rocco. Rocco Becht. I think they should be in there. I think Sawyer Robinson has an argument to be in there. But all in all, I don't mind that list. Here's why I love Sam Leavitt ahead of those guys. And then I'm going to read you the reasoning that Pro Football Focus has for him being as high as he is. Sam Leavitt dominated last year for Arizona State. He was, even as a redshirt freshman, not a true freshman, the best in the country. I don't know if that's even debatable, honestly. I don't know what freshman or redshirt freshman quarterback you could put up against Sam Leavitt that was better than him. Like, sure, you could argue Arch, but again, Arch did not see the field as much as Sam. Sam was the day one starter for ASU. He only missed one game last year. And with that game missed, he still passed for nearly 2,900 yards, 24 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions, and 4 of those came before November, when football games start to matter, and after his return from injury from Cincinnati. So he gets back on the football field, right? He only throws 2 more picks the rest of the year. In that time, he plays 2, 4, 6 more games, 5, 6, 7 more games. 7 more games to end the year. Oklahoma State, UCF, K-State, BYU, Arizona, Iowa State, and then the Peach Bowl against Texas. In that time frame, he goes on to throw, is that 15? 9, 12, 16. 16 touchdowns against 2 interceptions. Now, he is held out of the end zone against Texas. That is the only game following his return from injury that he did not throw a touchdown in. But guess what? He was playing Texas, arguably the best defense in college football last year. No less than top 5. And Texas was wreaking havoc in the backfield. They were all over Sam Leavitt. And yet Leavitt was still somehow making plays. Don't forget, he still managed to rush for 60 yards, and that was with taking 3 sacks. So he was going to be close to at least 80 rushing yards, man. At least. He was doing everything he could. He was making guys miss in the backfield, despite the fact that Anthony Hill Jr. and Colin Simmons and some of the other guys that are on that defensive line that aren't coming to my head right now are flying around back there. He was still terrific. He airs it out for 222 yards. Not bad. He did have a 62-yard long. You had only a 52.2% completion. There was a lot of drops in that game. I want to say there was at least 3 or 4 drops, which some of those were drive-defining drops. So not great, but things happen. When you look at the statistics on the year, just under 2,900 yards, 24 touchdowns, 6 picks, 443 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns. It's pretty darn solid, man. And it's more than solid, especially the second half of the year. You look at what happened from November 2nd to January 1st. It was remarkable. Stack those numbers up with any other quarterback in the nation. I don't know how many guys you can name ahead of him that are better. He's also a redshirt sophomore going into next year. He's got 3 more years to play college football if he wants to. And he's looking like a first-round pick right now for 2026 if he did decide to go 2 seasons at ASU and then go pro. And that is entirely realistic for him right now. He is terrific. He also has Kenny Dillingham coming back, and he has Marcus Arroyo coming back to continue coaching him and getting him to that next level, to getting him to be even better than where he is right now. And right now, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And according to Pro Football Focus, he's number 2. Looking at the guys that he's ahead of, I like him ahead of these guys. Let's look at him. Carson Beck is fine. His first year starting for Georgia in 2023, pretty darn solid. And he looked like a first-round pick, but then he wet the bed this past year with Georgia. And, he did lose a lot of players. He loses Ladd McConkey. He loses Brock Bowers, but we can only make excuses for so long. He's too high. Drew Aller, Garrett Nussmeier, Arch Manning. I can hear arguments for them ahead of Sam Leavitt, but I would still take Sam Leavitt ahead of them. That might be a little bit of bias, but it is what it is. Here's what Pro Football Focus had to say in their defense of Sam Leavitt at number 2. Direct quote here, quote, The redshirt freshman's 89.1 PFF overall grade ranked ninth among FBS quarterbacks, and he was the only Power 4 signal caller with an 80-plus grade as both a passer and a runner. His 1.1% turnover-worthy play rate ranked fourth among all quarterbacks, and his 34 missed tackles on the ground were fifth most at the position in the Power 4. That's insane. 1.1% turnover-worthy plays. And think about the fact that 4 of those interceptions came in the first half of the year. And I imagine that rate was a little bit higher at that point in time. And then for him to go the remainder of the season with only 2 picks on a couple hundred pass attempts, I don't know. I'm not going to do the math in my head, but a lot of pass attempts, only 2 interceptions. That is a player who takes care of the football. And for him to have 6 interceptions on the year is already terrific. He's only going to get better. He's such a special football player. The way he runs it, the way he's able to pass it, there's so much there, man. By the way, he is a true dual threat. I've said this many times and I'll continue to say it. I don't care what he looks like. That is a dual threat quarterback. He's going to beat you with his legs. He's going to score touchdowns on the ground, and he already looks like an elite passer. So I think PFF nailed this, and I love it to pieces because I don't think a lot of people are giving Sam Leavitt the roses and the flowers that he deserves right now as one of the best quarterbacks from last season and now going into this year as one of the best quarterbacks. But he's also got one of the best receivers coming back with him as well. Talking about Jordyn Tyson coming up next on the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to talk about our friends over at TurboTax now. You know what taxes used to be? Taxes used to be dealing with piles of paperwork. It used to be frustrating forms and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Past tense, that's what taxes were. Now, present tense, taxes are easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who is matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology with cross checks for millions of data points for 100% accuracy. And while they work on your taxes, you're going to get real-time updates on their progress. And you get the most money back guaranteed when you use TurboTax, all while you can go about your day. There is no stressing. There is no worrying. There is no waiting. Now, this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax live service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Thanks, as always, for tuning in and making Locked On Sun Devils your first listen of the day. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every single day. All right. Sam Leavitt, top 2 quarterback going into next year. Jordyn Tyson, top 3 receiver going into next year. I think I like this more than Sam Leavitt going into next year's top 2 quarterback because you can look at the guys that Leavitt is ahead of, and you can make arguments. Drew Aller and Garrett Nussmeier and Arch Manning, I think, do have arguments. I also think that those guys are projection. Aller's not. We know what Aller is, but Aller is also slowly improving. We'll see. The receivers. Yeah, I definitively would take Jordyn Tyson over everyone that's behind him. And I also think that they nailed the 2 guys ahead of him. Jordyn Tyson, number 3. Here's the number 1 receiver. If you even have to think about it, you just didn't watch college football last year, which is a shame because it was a great season. Number 1 is Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. Undeniable. There's no question about it. If he was draft eligible as a true freshman, he is the top 5 pick, and he is the first receiver off the board. Even with Tetairoa McMillan and Luther Burden and Matthew Golden in next year's, or this year's, or oh my goodness, in this year's draft class for the wide receiver position. Next year, he is going into the year as the undisputed, unquestionable number 1 receiver. Number 2, I'm totally good with this. I feel like some people may have a problem with this. I hope you don't. And that's Ryan Williams at Alabama. Don't worry. He turned 18 years old, so we don't have to hear on every single game that comes through on Saturday for Alabama more than once during a game where they go, "Did you know that Ryan Williams is only 17 years old and he's doing all this to college football?" We don't have to hear that anymore. He's 18. We're done. Now, if they start doing this again and they're like, "He's 18 years old," I might riot in my living room. But I am totally good with Ryan Williams being ahead of Jordyn Tyson because with an up and down offense and up and down quarterback play, he was pretty consistent. And you can look at the stats and be like, "Well, we had some bad games." And it's like, yeah, and a lot of that is going to be the quarterback's inability and the inefficiency that they had to get him the football. There wasn't much last year that Ryan Williams did wrong. If you want an example of how good he is, watch the Georgia game. One of the best games I've seen in my life for a collegiate receiver against any college football defense, let alone a defense that has won 2 national championships in the last 5 years. Phenomenal. Jordyn Tyson, number 3. Love it. Love it. Because Jordyn Tyson was unstoppable in the second half of the season. When Sam Leavitt took off, Jordyn Tyson took off with him. And keep in mind, throughout the season, Jordyn Tyson was right around 10 targets a game. Like, him and Leavitt had an instant connection from week 1 all the way up until the Arizona game. Because unfortunately, he missed the last 2 games with injury. I am not someone that 100% would say that, like, "Oh, Jordyn Tyson played against Texas, ASU beats Texas." I do think he makes a difference, but I'm just not there with that's why ASU lost that game kind of thing. So I'm just not there. Definitely would have made a difference. Guys he is ahead of. I love it. I really do. Elijah Surratt at Indiana. Eric Singleton at Auburn. Cam Coleman at Auburn. How crazy is it? Auburn has 2 of the best receivers in college football. If Jackson Arnold doesn't do anything this year with those 2 guys and more guys coming in, he's just terrible. Anyways, Bryant Wesco at Texas. Kevin Concepcion, I think, at Texas A&M. Mekhi Lemon at USC. And Eugene Wilson at Florida. That's a pretty good wide receiver group. There are guys that are coming in, too, for this upcoming recruiting class that are going to be really interesting. Decorion Moore and Khalik Lockett. Like, there's a lot of guys to be excited about. But having Jordyn Tyson ahead of some of those guys, ahead of a lot of 5 stars in there, a lot of 5 stars, Tyson deserves to be ahead of them. Definitively. Let me tell you why, and then let's read what PFF has to say. Over the last about month and a half of the year, Tyson was leading the country in receiving yards. Do you guys realize how crazy that is? That an ASU receiver was able to pace the country in receiving yards for about a 6 or 7 game stretch. I want to say it was a 7-game stretch. His worst 2 games of the season, Texas Tech, 2 catches, 33 yards, and Mississippi State, 2 catches for 7 yards. Every game after that, he had no fewer than 5 receptions. He only did that once. 6 catches in every game except against Utah, where he had 5. When Sam Leavitt returned from injury, and honestly, even before that, against Cincinnati, where Jeff Sims was his quarterback, he still went over 100 yards. Every game following that, where Sam Leavitt was his quarterback, 81 yards was his lowest, and that was his first game back. Then 99 yards against UCF, and then after that, this is insane, 176 yards against Kansas State, 125 yards against BYU, 2 ranked teams, by the way, and 143 yards against U of A. That's pretty crazy. That is pretty crazy to see the tear that he went on to end the year. 3 games of 125 or more yards in his last 3 games. He had a 99-yard game just before the last 3-game stretch against Cincinnati with a backup quarterback and one that a lot of people are not big on, still in 108 yards. Against Texas State, he had 120 yards. So what is that? 500-yard games plus a game of 99 yards. Insane. On the season, he ended with 14.7 yards per reception. Still had 75 catches, too. So it's not like it was like 50 catches for however many yards to be able to get almost 15 a catch. Like, that is a more than good sample size. Also, I would have lost this bet. His longest reception was 59 yards. I would have thought he had topped a 70-yard at some point. Certainly felt like it, especially because he had at least 3 catches that went over 50 yards on the season. He had several catches that were over 40 yards and 30 yards. Like, he was nuts, man. He was big play guy, and he was run after catch, and he was stretch the field. He was a special football player. So going into next year, yeah, he's absolutely one of the best receivers in college football. I can't say definitively number one. Maybe I can argue him over Ryan Williams. I won't. Personally, I won't, because I am huge on Ryan Williams. But other than that, yeah, Tyson is better than the rest of these guys. He's a redshirt junior, so he's got 2 more years to do this if he wants to. Or he can go into the NFL draft where he's trending towards being a first-round pick. Yeah, he's pretty good, man. He is pretty dang good. Now, here's what PFF has to say as we round out talking about Jordyn Tyson. Direct quote, once again. Something clicked for the Colorado transfer in the second half of the season. In Arizona State's final 6 games of the regular season, Tyson led the nation with 729 receiving yards and ranked second in the Power 4 in yards per route run, 4.03. He suffered a shoulder injury in Arizona State's final regular season game against U of A, which kept him out of the Big 12 title game and the college football playoff quarterfinal, the latter of which the Sun Devils lost in double overtime. Now, again, I don't know that not having Tyson was the reason ASU lost against Texas. He makes a difference for sure. I don't think that's the reason they lost. But it's difficult to imagine that those last 2 games against Iowa State and Texas, 2 elite secondaries, by the way, that Tyson would not have torn them up. With what Sam Leavitt was doing with Xavier Guillory and Melcon Stovall and Malik McLean, guys who really did not get a ton of opportunities during the regular season, they were killing it. So you put in Jordyn Tyson, I'm 100% confident he has 2 more 100-yard games. He ended the year with 10 touchdowns. I'd give him at least 2 more. I'd say he gets 1 in each game. He was terrific. He was spectacular. So yeah, absolutely 100% agree that he is number 3. And the guys behind him, unlike with quarterback, I don't think I can argue any of these guys ahead of him. Elijah Surratt, that is a very underrated receiver at Indiana. I like Surratt a lot. Let's see what he does now that Curtis Rourke is gone. And that was a pass-heavy offense, too. Auburn guys, they're really good. Bryant Westco at Texas, I am very much on record as liking him a lot. I also like a lot of the guys that are in Clemson, and they did not get mentioned. So let's see. But, yeah, Jordyn Tyson, number 3 receiver going into next year. Love it. I love that more than Sam Leavitt being number 2 going into next year. There are some guys that I also think should be top 10 in the rankings going into next year. More than you think, to be honest. And a handful of guys I want to shout out as well. Coming up next, this is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You guys are the best fans in the whole world for making Locked On Sun Devils your first listen of the day. Shout out especially to my everydayers who are here every day. Jordyn Tyson, number 3 going into next year at wide receiver. Sam Leavitt, number 2 going in next year at quarterback. There's guys that also need to be in the top 10 of their position groups going into next year. 5. Oh, no, 6. 6. Well, yeah, 5. We'll get there. 5 to 6 guys. I will explain why it's not definitively 6. That should be in the top 10 of their position groups going in the next year. Let's start with Kanye Udoh. Incoming running back coming in from Army. At Army, he ran for 1,100 yards. That's crazy, considering double-digit running backs touched the ball for them last year, and their quarterback ran the ball over 300 times. And yet Udoh still managed over 1,100 yards. Under 200 carries, by the way. Like, that is an insane statistic to think about. And now he's coming to Arizona State, where he is going to be in one of the best offensive systems for running backs. And the success of the transfer running backs over the last several years is pretty nuts too. Rachaad White had a 1,000-yard season as a transfer. Xavion had a 1,000-yard season as a transfer. Cam Scatterbo is one of the greatest running backs in program history as a transfer. ASU knows what they're doing when it comes to their transfer running backs. They know how to identify them, and they know how to get the most out of them. Sean Aguano, one of the best running back coaches in the country. Udoh is already coming in as one of the most slept-on receivers in the country. And that's a darn shame, because double-digit touchdowns and 1,100 rushing yards on on 200 carries and less than 200 touches. He only had one catch last year. So all of his damage was as a runner, and he still managed to do what he did. He is going to go to Arizona State, and he should no worse be a top 10 running back in college football, especially a lot of guys are leaving. Like Quinshon Judkins is gone. Ashton Jeanty is gone. Cam Scatterbo is gone. Is it Caleb Johnson at Iowa is gone. Taj Brooks is gone. Devin Neal is gone. There is a huge changing of the guard at the running back position, and Udoh should come into the year, no doubt, as a top 10 guy. Next guy I have, Ben Coleman. Another terrific player for ASU. Played next to Lee Fontanu this year, who was a first-team all-conference at center. He is someone I'm not seeing in like any draft cycles, and that needs to change because he is definitely a future player at the next level. Ben Coleman, also a next-level player. Second-team all-conference this past year with Arizona State at the left guard spot. Prior to this, he missed the 2023 season with an injury. He had transferred from Cal before that. He was an all-conference player in the Pac-12 RIP back then. This is someone who has a lot of success and sustained success when he's on the field. He was healthy last year. There's no reason to assume he will not be healthy going into this year. I expect him to repeat what he did, probably be even a little bit better. So, yeah, I don't know how many guards there are in the country that have the resume that Ben Coleman has, with multiple all-conference awards and for 2 different conferences. He's good. He is top 10. Next up, these guys are all on defense moving forward. CJ Fight, you watch this show, you know that this is a big CJ Fight show. But there's a reason for that, and it's because he has started since he was a freshman. He's going into his true junior season. He is one of the most dependable defenders on this team. He is a terrific run defender. He's able to take on double teams. He's one of the biggest reasons that ASU was so stout against a run last year is you could not run up the middle because big old 99 was right there, and he was going to snuff everything out. Everything was forced outside, and that's when the linebackers and the safeties were able to get there. He's terrific. He was also able to get after the quarterback a little bit last year. He had a ballerina dancing touchdown into the end zone. The big old bear was dancing into the end zone. He is top 10 in the nation for sure. Especially if you want to like specifically talk about nose guards, then yeah, CJ Fight top 10, probably top 5. Next up, this is the 5 to 6 that I was talking about is Javen Robinson and or Keith Abney. The reason why I have and or is because I as much as I would love for both of them to be top 10, I don't know if you could put both of them top 10. I would love it, especially because they were just this elite duo last year, and they were forced to be that. They were thrown into the fire, not because ASU wanted to, but because they had to. These guys were playing 90% of the snaps when they were on the field as corner 1 and corner 2. They were terrific. Abney breaks up 9 passes last season. Javen Robinson had that 64-yard interception that should have called game against BYU before some not great play calling to end the game. And both of them tied for the team lead with 3 interceptions. They were terrific. They're going into their junior year for Keith Abney and redshirt junior year for Xavion Robinson. And there is a very good chance that those two are going to absolutely dominate once again and be the linchpin of the corner position for ASU. And there's a changing of the guard because LT Welsh is gone and some of your other depth is gone. Cole Martin is gone. Shamari Simmons, who played slot, is gone. It's going to be up to them and some guys that are coming in. Kendrick Breedlove and Nyland Green are coming in. Some of your young guys are going to have to step up as well. But Xavion Robinson, Keith Abney are terrific. Some of the best kept secrets in the country. They are top 10 at their position. Last guy I want to mention, and this to me, of all the guys I mentioned, this is the no-doubter. Like, if he's not in a top 10 list, you don't know what you're doing. That's Xavion Alford. One of the best safeties in college football last season. First team all Big 12. He is someone who missed 1,000 days of college football between some really crappy transfer rules. He still managed 85 tackles, 2 interceptions, 5 deflections, missing 1,000 games. Or 1,000 games. Good Lord, could you imagine? 1,000 days of football. Special what he did. And again, he is coming back as the best player on the Sun Devils defense. I don't know if that's arguable. And he is one of the best safeties in the country. Without question. A couple of guys I want to shout out real quick as I take care of my phone and an alarm that I forgot to turn off. A couple of guys I want to mention real quick. 6 guys I want to mention real quick that deserve some love as well. I would say these guys are top 15, some of them, top 20, top 25, or guys that could crack the top 10 by the end of the season. On offense, Kyson Brown, Shimon Mateer, Josh Atkins. Kyson Brown is someone I'm really excited with, and I think that him and Kanye Udoh could be a 1A, 1B running back duo. Kyson was phenomenal in a reserve role for Cam Scadaboo last year. I anticipate he's going to be just as good this year. Shimon Mateer, 5 touchdowns, could have had 6 touchdowns at the tight end spot. As long as he is more consistent with catching the football and kind of gets out of the yips when it comes to the drops, he could lead this team in touchdowns, and I would not be surprised. Josh Atkins, the left tackle, he settled down to end the year. If he continues progressing forward, he's going to be one of the better left tackles in college football. Defensively, 3 guys I want to shout out. Jacob Richcon-Geika, playing right next to CJ Fight. Those two were terrific. Keyshawn Elliott at linebacker, he missed some games. Caleb McCullough stepped up for him. If McCullough had returned, he would be a top 10 linebacker for me. But Keyshawn Elliott was spectacular when he was on the field last year. And he didn't miss too much time. I want to say he missed 2, maybe 3 games. And he still was terrific for the team. Top 5 in tackles with 65. 2 sacks. He had an interception. Like, he is a playmaker. And then shout out to Ghost Rouser, who led the team with 98 tackles. He had a sack, 4 breakups. Didn't have a turnover. That is changing this year. I think Miles Rouser is going to be an enforcer. That is a hitter, by the way. He is, that's a tone-setting safety. I don't want to compare him to some of the greats like a Vontaze Burfict or a Darren Woodson, but dude, Miles Rouser, you see him running up at you, you make a business decision and you just get down. I'm not trying to take the full force that Rouser can inflict on you. Overall, I'm critical of PFF every once in a while. I think they do good work. Sometimes it's kind of like, come on, what are we doing here? But I love that they are super high on Sam Leavitt and Jordyn Tyson. And if I can give them some advice, these are some players that they should consider for their top 10s as well. What do you guys think? Is there someone I am too low on and not bringing up? Do you think Sam Leavitt is the number 2 quarterback in the country going into next year? Do you think Jordyn Tyson is the number 3 receiver going into next year? Let me know in the comments. You can hit me up on Twitter at RichieBrads36. The podcast is there at LO_Sun Devils. Wherever you're getting your shows, hit like, hit subscribe, turn on notifications. You will get an update whenever we post new content. Shout out my everydayers who are here every day. And thanks to all of you for making us your first listen of the day. We will be back again very soon. We got lots of stuff coming up for you. I have got a crossover with one of our brand new shows, The Portal. That is coming up for you guys very, very soon. I will have that uploaded, and I encourage you guys to take a look at the show as well. I'll catch you guys next time, and until then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.